How does Russell Wilson stack up against the AFC West going into 2022 after not having a large enough sample size against them previously? We take a look at career record against the AFC West, who Russell Wilson needs to account for in each of the AFC West matchups, and much more. You get that on today's brand new episode, Locked on Broncos.
You are Locked on Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast. Part of the Locked on Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, Broncos country? Welcome back into a brand new episode, Locked on Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast here on the Locked on NFL Network, your team every day from the South Stands to the end zone. I'm your host, as always, Cody Roark, joined alongside by my co-host, Sayre Bedinger. Both of us, we cover the Denver Broncos for the Locked on Network and 9 News. Broncos country, thank you so much for making Locked on Broncos your first listen of the day every single day. We appreciate you. Happy Friday. Enjoy us with your morning cup of coffee. You can also get this podcast wherever you get podcasts in audio format. Make sure you hit that follow or that subscribe button, and you can watch us here on YouTube. Locked on Broncos would mean the world if you would smash that like button here down below, and also make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss out on a day's worth of Denver Broncos news, content, and coverage. It's great to be back here once again talking all things Broncos football. But Sayre, our topic of discussion today is kind of comparing as we get into the slow part of the offseason, looking at this roster, looking at specific positions, and comparing them against the rest of the AFC West. What better way to start than by looking at Russell Wilson here against the AFC West in general?
I love it. I absolutely love it. And Cody, you know what? It's kind of surprising. Russell Wilson has been in the NFL for 10 years, only gone through the AFC West twice. And then, of course, he had that one matchup against the AFC West in a Super Bowl early in his career. I've forgotten who that was even against at this point. But
I wonder who their opponent was that year. Well,
yeah,
it certainly wasn't the Broncos.
Right. Yeah, I couldn't have. I don't think anybody showed up for that game besides the Seahawks. So it's hard to say, really. But, yeah, it's an interesting thing to look at, right? Russell Wilson through the years against the AFC West and how that could translate, if at all, going forward. And I think there is some translatability. So I'm excited to talk about it.
Well, let's talk about it right here. Let's look at the Los Angeles Chargers inside this AFC West. How does Russell Wilson maybe fare against the Chargers? Well, his career record against the Chargers, interesting enough, in the two matchups, 0 for 2. However, he has 4 touchdowns thrown to 1 interception in both those matchups in total with a 100 QB rating. So it kind of speaks to a bigger picture. Maybe the defense was struggling there. But the last time that Russ faced the Chargers, it was Week 10 of the 2018 season. They lost 25-17, and in that loss specifically, Russell Wilson, he was sacked 4 times by that Chargers defense. So now you look at it now in hindsight, you look at the Chargers defense, they've definitely added some pieces to it that have made them better. Who does Russell Wilson have to account for in 2022 when the Broncos do face the Chargers 2 times per year?
Well, there's some big names and heavy hitters out there now, right? Obviously, they still have Joey Bosa, they still have Derwin James, but they added Khalil Mack and they added J.C. Jackson, 2 of the biggest offseason pickups for any team in the league. And I think, Cody, that really is something that I think has people riding this Chargers bandwagon a little bit, right? I mean, I think most every offseason, there's a lot of people that really jump on the Chargers bandwagon because they are historically one of the best teams in the offseason at looking good on paper. But how is that going to translate into the games? That's what we need to see. That's what we need proof of. But the Chargers have undoubtedly made some big-time moves on the defensive side of the ball to get Brandon Staley the kind of pieces that he might need in order to look. I mean, we looked at the Vic Fangio defensive scheme as one that could really limit even great quarterbacks. So Brandon Staley running a similar scheme, you have to think, they think they have a good shot to stop guys like Russell Wilson. And it's not impossible to stop Russell Wilson. Look, as great as the acquisition is, he's still human, right? He still has his days. So we have to account for all these star players in the Chargers defense now, specifically their pass defense with the pass rush pickup of Khalil Mack, and then in their pass defense, the corner, J.C. Jackson, 17 picks in the last 2 years.
Well, and they even added Sebastian Joseph Day from the Los Angeles Rams. They're a little bit more solidarity on the interior because they really struggled against the run last season. But what type of advantages might Russell Wilson have against the Chargers? Well, Sayre, I think a strong run game is important. Javonte Williams, look, the Broncos and anybody last year could run all over the Chargers defense. And I'm wondering if these moves that they've made will help address that. If not, I still think the Broncos have areas that they can build on there. But also, I think that the Broncos have more offensive weapons in the passing game that can kind of outmatch what they have coverage-wise. I mean, look, you have J.C. Jackson. There is Asante Samuel Jr. you have to account for, but the question for him, he's already had a couple of concussions in his rookie season. Like that right there is a little bit concerning there. We talk about the impact of the NFL and the physical side of things there. They've missed out on him a little bit, but then there's even Michael Davis there for the Los Angeles Chargers. I think Denver probably has the advantage with more weapons versus the fact that, the Chargers don't have enough cover guys, I think, that are quality enough to be able to keep up with the Jerry Jeudy's, Cortland Suttons, the Tim Patricks, the KJ Hamlers, Albert Okwuegbunams, and whoever else they may add. Yes, they have J.C. Jackson, but the greater strength, I think, is with the Broncos' numbers advantage here.
And the Chargers have to be hoping that their pass rush gets home in that case, right? I mean, the Broncos have too many guys that can beat your coverage, right? And I think one of the funny matchups that you might look out for is Joey Bosa in the open field against Russell Wilson, because we know Joey Bosa, I mean, he's been crossed up now by Trevor Siemian. He was crossed up by Teddy Bridgewater. He is dreading the eventual meetup in the open field with Russell Wilson. I can tell you that much, because he doesn't want to lose another jockstrap out there on the field, Cody. He's already lost too many to Broncos players, but in all seriousness, like, I do think that the Broncos have a great advantage here in terms of just being able to win one-on-one matchups. We know if Brandon Staley's defense is still an iteration or a derivative of Vic Fangio's defense, there'll be plenty of zone coverage, but the Broncos have receivers that can beat any type of coverage. Yeah. And Russell Wilson is a great extender of plays. He can get outside the pocket. He can break the pocket. He can break down a great pass rush even. He can avoid that pressure. Unlike what a lot of Broncos quarterbacks in recent years we've seen from them, right? When pressure gets home, those guys a lot of times would just kind of fold to the pressure. They didn't necessarily have the greatest pocket poise. Russell Wilson brings another element to the table of being able to waste essentially a great pass rush by getting outside the pocket and creating offense, creating plays.
Well, coming up here in just a moment, we're going to dive into the Russell Wilson dynamic against the Kansas City Chiefs and why we believe that Russell Wilson presents the best chance the Broncos have ever had at beating Patrick Mahomes, and why. You get that coming up here in just a moment. But before we do that, let me tell you about BetOnline.net, the sponsor. Today's episode, Locked On Broncos. And after months of playing, college basketball has determined the top teams for the Final Four and will determine this year's national champion this coming weekend. BetOnline.net is your number one source for all your sports betting needs and information, from all the latest odds, contests, and player props, you name it. BetOnline remains the best spot for all your latest sports developments, including podcasts and reviews for all the leagues this season. And it's not just basketball. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sporting wagering information needs, including live betting and your favorite Vegas casino games. So head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and the action. BetOnline, where the game starts. As we jump into the second half action on today's episode, Locked On Broncos. Once again, Broncos country, thank you so much for making Locked On Broncos your first listen of the day. Every single day, we appreciate all the love and the support that you provide to both Sayre Bedinger and myself, and all of Sayre's hats that he wears that Broncos country just loves. His hat game is on fire. We appreciate all the interaction we get from all of you, and it would mean the world to us if you'd hit that subscribe button if you're a brand new viewer or listener here of the show. And if you're watching on YouTube, make sure you smash that like button so you can continue to push this podcast out to the algorithm. We appreciate you as always, Broncos country. But now, Sayre, we dive into the deeper matchup aspect here of Russell Wilson against the Kansas City Chiefs. Now, kind of the same similar situation. He's only faced the AFC West 2 times. He's only faced Patrick Mahomes 1 time, though, Sayre. So Russell Wilson's career record against the Kansas City Chiefs is a 1-1 record, 5 touchdowns to 0 interceptions thrown against the Chiefs, and an overall 112 quarterback rating when taking on the Kansas City Chiefs. And I just can't help but kind of salivate a little bit the fact that the Chiefs defense has gotten a little worse this offseason. We'll talk about that a little bit more in depth, but the last time that Russell Wilson faced the Chiefs, well, guess what? He got to take on Patrick Mahomes. Week 15 in the 2018 season, he won a 38-31 duel against Patrick Mahomes in that game. Now, I tell you what, the fact that the Broncos now have a quarterback that can kind of match, I don't know necessarily like score for score, it depends. I think with the offensive talent, you have the potential there. We have to be able to see that. But the Broncos have a quarterback that can lead a resilient charge against Mahomes and the Chiefs. I'm excited about that. But, Sayre, I got to ask the question here once again. Who does Russell Wilson have to account for on the Chiefs defense when the Broncos play them this upcoming season?
Well, I think the biggest name, right, is Chris Jones on the interior defensive line, one of the best defensive linemen, pass rushers in the NFL, one of the best defensive players, I think, just in general in the league. He's obviously very, very good, and he's a player that the Broncos have had struggles with, frankly, through the years, right? He's been a guy that can create pressure. He can get through the line of scrimmage and bust up running plays. I mean, he is a problem. And a lot of times, not him necessarily just by himself, but it feels like that a lot of times. He can kind of make your offense feel one dimensional. Like if he's shutting down the run at a high rate, I mean, it feels like you can't really get any sort of balance going. So he's one of those guys that you do have to pay attention for. And then obviously you got guys like Frank Clark, who coming off kind of a down year, kind of picked things up as the season went along after the Melvin Ingram addition last year. But now Melvin Ingram's not there. And then in the secondary, you've got L'Jarius Sneed, who's almost like the last man standing back there. I mean, they still have Thornhill at safety, and they just picked up Justin Reed, but I mean, no Honey Badger. I mean, that's going to be a huge difference maker for the Chiefs. So I think the guys that you do have to account for, it's way less now than it was even just a couple months ago.
It's going to be a very interesting dynamic for Steve Spagnuolo to try to maybe amplify the defense. And I think that one advantage that the Chiefs do have right now, they have 12 picks in the 2022 NFL draft. So they could go out at pick number 29 or pick number 30 or one of their other second-round picks, and they can go in and add an edge rusher. They can add a cornerback. And, like I said, that's where the areas they really need to bolster. I think L'Jarius Sneed played really, really well for them last season. I liked watching him, but they need to add more guys opposite. And I think this is where the Broncos and maybe other teams have obviously passing attacks in the AFC West have the advantage against the Chiefs, is that just like the Chargers, the Chiefs don't necessarily have enough cover guys to match the total number of weapons that some of these offenses do have. So I think that does bode well to the favor of the Broncos in the potential matchup, at least on paper right now, against this Kansas City Chiefs team. But also outside of that, I think one thing that you mentioned here in the show notes is you have to hope that you can get a matchup, an early season road matchup against KC. It'd be better to play KC on the road in the beginning part of the season versus December where it gets cold and snowy, even though that's been the narrative for the Broncos the last couple of years. They've always had that late game against KC on the road, usually a primetime Sunday night football matchup. I imagine it's probably going to be a primetime matchup here once again, but I do think the timing of that matchup is everything. The defensive unit will likely still be trying to able to find their footing early on in the road matchup there, especially against this Chiefs offense. And look, now there's been rumors circulating, Sayre, that the Chiefs are trying to find a way to trade for a big time wide receiver. And I'm just hoping, and look, this would be negligence on behalf of the Seahawks. A lot of people mentioned DK Metcalf. If DK Metcalf lands in KC, I'm going to be very, very angry at the evident tanking that the Seahawks franchise would be apparently doing if they make that move happen. But I'd say right now, until something like that happens, I do like the Broncos' chances in the AFC West, and I think Russell Wilson gives them that type of chance there, Sayre.
I do too, Cody. And I think, like you mentioned, getting a matchup early in the season, that could be key because we've seen, at least last year, I know this was the case, the Chiefs defense didn't really get going until about midway through the season. And then they really started to tighten up. That's when they started to really play well. Obviously, the pickup of Melvin Ingram, again, that was a big
Huge
thing for that defense. But at the same time, just with a lot of moving parts in anything, you want to get a matchup early on in the season so that you can kind of get that win under your belt, right? Because a week 2 or a week 3 road game against the Kansas City Chiefs, if you can win that matchup because the Chiefs are still kind of trying to figure out what Patrick Mahomes is trying to get, chemistry with his new receivers, and the defense isn't quite figuring things out post Tyrann Mathieu, like they're not communicating as well. You don't want to face the Chiefs like we talked about later in the season after they've kind of figured those things out, because they do end up as a better sum of their parts than maybe their talent would seem to indicate. I mean, we're talking now about Charvarius Ward being a big loss for them, but just a couple years ago, it was like, who the heck is Charvarius Ward? So he obviously developed well in their system. So you know that they have good enough coaching to be able to bring these players along. So for me, I say if you can get them on the road early on in the season, that bodes well for Russell Wilson and the Broncos offense.
Well, how might the Denver Broncos and Russell Wilson fare against the Las Vegas Raiders? You get that coming up here in just a moment, especially when we talk about maybe how the Broncos can flip the script against Derek Carr. You get that coming up here in just a moment. But before we do that, let me tell you about Built Bar, the other sponsor of today's episode, Locked On Broncos. And folks, Built Bar is the best tasting protein bar that is out there on the market today. Each bar contains 17 grams of protein, 130 calories, and only 4 grams of sugar. For something that contains 100% milk chocolate, it's soft and easy to chew. That is a tremendous value here for Built Bar. They have 9 amazing original flavors of peanut butter brownie, double chocolate, salted caramel, raspberry. They have a wide variety of flavors you could check out at Built.com. Plus, they also throw in the occasional limited time flavor that you could check out exclusively at Built.com. So, I want you to go right now, Broncos Country, go to Built.com. And when you find a box or a flavor that you like, make sure you go to checkout. Enter promo code LOCK15. That's one word, LOCKed15, and that's going to get you 15% off your next order today at Built.com. Broncos Country, as we jump into the fourth quarter action on today's episode, Lockdown Broncos, just once again, happy Friday. Thank you so much for making Lockdown Broncos your first listen of the day, Sayre. Let's take a look now at Russell Wilson and his history against the Las Vegas Raiders. Now, his career record against the Raiders. Now, granted, this was the time that they were called the Oakland Raiders. He is 2-0 against them. He's thrown 3 touchdowns to 1 interception, and he has an average 89 quarterback rating against them. The last time that Russell Wilson took on Derek Carr and the Raiders was in Week 6 of 2018, and they went on and they won that matchup 27-3. Now, for Russ in that game, he threw 3 touchdowns. He threw 1 interception. He was only sacked 1 time. But against Derek Carr in that game was sacked 6 times. So I think it kind of reveals maybe a little bit of a formula here, Sarah, as to what the Broncos need to do to have a better chance to beat the Raiders. They've struggled against them in the last couple of years. They've split some matchups. They've been swept by them, I believe, in the last 2 seasons. They should have won that last one, a couple of years ago when Drew Lock threw that 92-yard touchdown to Jerry Jeudy. They just simply couldn't hold on at the end there against that very depleted Broncos defense. And unfortunately, came back to bite them in the tail. It's a little different right now, though. However, being able to sack Derek Carr 6 times, that's the formula. Get pressure, because against the Broncos, they've had a very hard time getting after him. They've had a hard time getting him wrapped up for a sack, and he's lit them up in the secondary because he's very efficient against both zone and man coverage. However, Russell Wilson doesn't have to worry about Derek Carr. Russell Wilson just has to worry about the defense. So, Sarah, who does Russell Wilson really have to account for when taking on this Las Vegas Raiders team? Because I feel like while they do have the addition of Chandler Jones and obviously Max Crosby extended, I'm not that scared of the Raiders defense outside of that. There's no other level of the field that really strikes fear into me. But then again, it's a different story. They could add in the NFL draft. That's a big what if.
It is. It absolutely is, Cody. And you mentioned the last Jerry Jeudy touchdown. I just have to touch on this. That was also his most recent touchdown. So that just pains me to think about that, a little bit.
I forgot about that.
That hurts. That is his most recent touchdown. So, man, maybe the Broncos open up the season against the Raiders and Jerry goes off for another 90-plus yard touchdown. We'll see. I don't know. But I would love to see, just neutralization. That's going to be really hard. Max Crosby and Chandler Jones, to me, Cody, and I've said this before, I think that's the best pass rush duo in the AFC West right now. All due respect to Khalil Mack and Joey Bosa, who I think a lot of people would put one tier above that. I personally like Max Crosby and Chandler Jones as the best duo in the division in terms of pass rush. I think that's the one area, though, of this Raiders defense right now that really scares me. I mean, unless you really love Patrick Graham and the way that he schemes up a defense, and I know that there was a lot of people that thought maybe he was a head coach candidate for the 2022 circuit, and that didn't end up happening. I think obviously he deserves plenty of due respect as a defensive coach and the things that he was able to do with the Giants the last few years. But really, I mean, the Raiders, to me, they have the worst linebackers in the division by far, and they have the worst secondary in the division, maybe not by far because Kansas City's maybe a little closer. But at the same time, I think that they do have kind of the worst defense in the division, arguably, at this point. So it's tough, man. It's going to be tough for the Raiders, I think. They don't have the draft capital anymore. They traded it for Devontae Adams. And so you're looking at a unit right there that's really, I mean, are they kind of what they are at this point? Are they just where they're at with Trayvon Mullen and Rock Ya-Sin and Hobbs and the other guys that they have in the secondary, Trayvon Merrick and Jonathan Abram. I mean, those are the guys that they have, and that's what they're going to have to work with. We thought maybe they'd go after J.C. Jackson because of the Patriots connection. That didn't happen. Then you think, well, maybe they're going to pivot quickly to Stephon Gilmore. That hasn't happened. So I guess we'll kind of wait and see. Maybe the Raiders still have something up their sleeve in terms of like a trade for James Bradbury. Remember Patrick Graham? I mentioned him. He played for him in New York. So maybe that could happen and really upgrade that unit. But for right now, I feel like the Broncos offense matches up really, really well against this Raiders defense, which has not been the case the last couple of years. You're right.
One thing I do know, Cortland Sutton loves playing against Rock Ya-Sin, a stiff arm factory. I just remember that one matchup just several years ago. And that's when Joe Flacco was the quarterback for the Broncos. Oh my gosh, what a time. He just, sit down. He just stiff armed him into the ground. I love that about Cortland. Cortland, like I said, watching that documentary, I don't know if you saw it on Russell Wilson's YouTube page, but he threw out kind of what was been going on in the offseason. Like he brought everybody from the Broncos office. Like he's holding meetings. Like it's like team meetings with film, and they're taking notes. They're all discussing. They're throwing. They're running these route concepts. Like Russell Wilson is going all in, and he's saying, "Hey, look, this is the work we got to put in if we want to win a Super Bowl here in Denver." I tell you what, he's already got the buy-in. Like with transformational, that right there is huge. Now, can it translate to on-field results here for this Broncos offense going into 2022? I know for Broncos country, that is the biggest factor that we are looking at. But Sayre, my friend, hey, I appreciate you, brother. It's been a fun episode on today's episode, Lockdown Broncos. Broncos country, enjoy your weekend. If we have any kind of breaking Broncos news that happens, you can expect an Mercy podcast courtesy Sayre Bedinger and myself. We appreciate you so much. Thank you for making us your first listen of the day every single day. Broncos country, make sure you hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications. We appreciate you so much. And real quick, Sayre, I want to give a massive shout out to a Twitter user here for Lockdown Broncos who left an awesome review. It comes in from Easy Season. He says, I first started listening a year ago when I found Cody on Twitter. His content grew on me, and he's now probably one of my favorite analysts out there. Super professional and creative, always looking for ways to get listeners involved in the show. I definitely recommend. You won't be disappointed. And then he said, edit. Now that they've added Sayre to the show, favorite podcast just got that much better. Love the guys. It feels like you're in a room right there with them just chopping up over some Broncos football. That's really what we want it to be. We want this to be a very open and welcoming community. We love the interaction with everybody in Broncos country. So thank you, Easy Season, for your review on Apple Podcasts. It means the world to us. Broncos country, we love you. We appreciate you. Enjoy your weekend. Stay safe. And we'll see you next time for a brand new episode, Locked On Broncos.